Karen.
Yes, Will.
This show was originally created in an effort to find if there really was more to us than just this three-dimensional bodies we inhabit.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, we've been exploring all the different modalities that come along with the potential of proving that the spiritual world actually exists.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on this week's show, we're blessed to welcome someone who has dedicated his life to doing just that.
Ooh, great.
Providing proof of that world just outside our 3D perceptions.
He has proof?
Well, let's see. Because he's written a book that dives really deep into this topic. Well, he's written many books, but we're going to talk about one particular. We're talking about Travelers, a book that takes readers on a spiritual quest that shifts consciousness.
Ooh, I like that.
Me too. Welcome to the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
we both want to believe.
so we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something
Anything
that will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
Hi, I'm Will.
And I'm Karen.
And today's main topic is one very dear to my heart. Donald Altman is a psychotherapist, a former Buddhist monk, an international mindfulness expert, and an award-winning author of over 20 books translated worldwide. Now, he's been featured as an expert in the Mindfulness movie. He's been profiled in the Living Spiritual Teachers Project and currently writes Psychology Today's Practical Mindfulness blog. His best-selling The Mindfulness Toolbox won 2 national publishing awards, and his books, Clearing Emotional Clutter and The Mindfulness Code, were both chosen as one of the best spiritual books of the year by Spirituality and Practice. And if that wasn't enough, his newest book, Travelers, it's a mystical and spiritual odyssey about a grieving psychiatrist who meets a mysterious traveler in a story of healing, hope, and renewal. I could not be more thrilled to welcome Donald Altman to the show. Welcome, Donald.
Well, hi, Will, and hi, Karen. It's great to be here with you today.
I definitely want to dive really deeply into your book, but before we do that, it's not often that we get the chance to talk to one of the foremost experts on the topic of mindfulness. So we'd be remiss if we didn't ask the obvious question. What's the difference between mindfulness and meditation, or is there even a difference?
Well, there is a difference, and that's a good question. Meditation is really about when you're focusing on something. It could be you're focusing on the breath, focusing on an object, or you're saying a mantra, but you're bringing your concentrated energy into one thing. Where mindfulness is really more about being aware of what's happening moment by moment, whatever is entering your sense fields, and paying attention to that. So noticing your thoughts in the moment, noticing as I take this breath, noticing the colors on the screen as I'm talking to you. So it's really all of that as you're moment by moment going through your day. It's a very different experience. It's kind of a meditation. It's a meditation on the moment, you might say, rather than any one particular thing, which is more meditation.
So it's like being present, but on steroids.
Yeah. It's very much on steroids. I think that's a good way to describe it. And you might think of it as being a little scary for some people because, we're so distractible all the time, aren't we? We're looking at screens all the time. Everything's trying to grab our attention. But mindfulness also brings in the idea of intentionality, that I can harness my attention and I can use it the way I want to. So for my benefit and for the benefit of others.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Karen and I have started a meditation practice. I've started it a little bit longer than Karen has, not to rub anything into any wounds, but
Mr. Meditator.
and yet you are so much better at it than I am, right off the bat. But a lot of the meditations that we run into have a lot of mindfulness in it, right? The Calm app and the Headspace, they all do mindfulness meditations. So when we talk about meditations, we're talking, there's a whole gambit of types of meditation, but just as much, there's a whole gambit of types of mindfulness practices, right? Because weren't you the vice president of the mindfulness eating?
Yeah, actually the Center for Mindful Eating. And I was vice president there. And I think one of the things that led me into mindfulness actually was I was a mindless eater. And I used I use food in a, yeah. I never met a cookie I didn't like. And if I was, emotional about something, or I couldn't deal with something, I would eat food as a way to, kind of medicate away my difficult emotions. So I was an emotional eater, and probably, most of us have done that at some point or another. And when I went into the monastery, I actually spent time as a Buddhist monk. And one of the things that really interested me was how I might be able to learn how to eat differently or understand my emotional eating. And one of the things that happened is very funny. So I went through this incredible 2 to 3 hour initiation into the very ancient practice. And then I got back, they showed myself and two other novice monks a room. They said, "You're going to be staying here." And there were three beds on the floor. I just sat on one of those mattresses, and suddenly I had buyer's remorse. Oh my God, what was I thinking? And right in that moment, I really could have used some food to distract me or make me feel better. But I had taken a vow not to eat after 12 noon. Now, the monks would get up very early in the morning. We would meditate by around 6. I get up at around 3:30 in the morning, be meditating, doing chanting. At around 6 o'clock, you'd have a 30-minute breakfast. And then from 11 to 12, you'd have lunch, but you wouldn't eat after that. And that was my greatest fear, was, could I do this? I didn't know. But anyway, here I am. I get in the monastery. I'm sitting on that futon, thinking how I needed something to help comfort me. Some food would have been nice. And right then I looked to my left, and there was a bookshelf there. And on this bookshelf, I could not believe my eyes, Will and Karen, was a giant Cadbury's chocolate bar. And my first thought, I saw that. My first thought was, I'll never forget it, somebody set me up. Like, like, oh yeah, they knew I was going to go to that futon. They knew that I was going to, so they put this big chocolate bar. I mean, nobody knew I had this eating issue. But when I saw that chocolate bar, my mind went into a war. We've all been there. One side of me was, I want that chocolate bar. That'll make me feel better. The other side was, no, you took this vow. You can't eat after 12 noon. You can't eat the chocolate bar. And there was this war going back and on. It was really amazing. And then after, I think it must have been an hour of hearing this war, suddenly it was like I got jolted, and I was watching these two voices. And it occurred to me right then and there, well, who says I have to do one or the other? I can do both. I can crave the chocolate bar, and yet I can still follow my vow, right? And it was showing, I learned an important lesson in that moment about how we can provide ourselves, we can be a container for all that exists within us. The challenges, the good things, the bad things, we can hold it all and find wholeness actually in doing that instead of getting reactive. Mm-hmm. So it was a powerful lesson for me. And I found out that nobody set me up. Nobody put the chocolate bar on that shelf to get me, so to speak. But people would donate things to the monks, all different kinds of things, and they would put them in different places throughout the monastery. So it wasn't, nobody was personally trying to catch me with that chocolate bar.
Sure. Well, you definitely are a kindred spirit, I'll tell you that, of mine.
So I have two questions.
Yeah.
When did you go to bed? You can't eat after 12. Like, could you go to bed at 1?
Right.
I mean, like, especially if you're getting up at 3.
Yes.
When was bedtime?
Well, we would, in the monastery, we would meditate, do all different kinds of meditation throughout the entire day. And I think we, probably about 9 or 10, go to bed, but then you get up at like
PM?
3, 9 or 10 at night.
Wow.
And you get up at 3:30 in the morning and start doing your.
Did you wake up ravenous?
It was a funny thing. This was a really amazing thing to me, was that, here I was, I didn't believe that I would be able to do this, not eating after 12 noon. In fact, the day before I went in the monastery, I went and I had this huge meal at this buffet that I knew about. It was going to be my last meal, right? But
I would have done the same thing.
What I discovered was that by using my concentrated energy like I was and focusing my mind, that I was not hungry after 12 noon, it kind of shocked me. You could have a tea or something to drink in the afternoon, a juice or a tea, and that's all I would have. But I did not have the kind of hunger that I thought I would have. It was really kind of amazing to me. And I think it was the quality of focusing your mind, paying attention like that, that I didn't have to need all these other distractions. I didn't need food to medicate away anything.
It's amazing the power of the mind, right? To get you beyond certain limitations that you put on yourself, really, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
It's really incredible. I mean, yeah. Some of the Tibetan monks have a thing called tumo, which is a practice of heating the body up. And now Tibet is a very harsh climate, really cold, but they're able to go out and actually melt the snow around their body and bring their body temperature up.
Heard about that.
And actually, it's really interesting. If you can raise the temperature in your extremities, like your hands, your fingertips, and your toes, that will actually lower the stress in your body. And I've had people in therapy sessions where I would have them put a little finger thermometer on the tip of their finger, and I would teach them how to focus on bringing heat to their extremities. And in a matter of minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, they could lower the temperature in their finger, or raise the temperature in their fingers, rather, about 5 or 10 degrees, just in a matter of minutes. That's the power of the mind is amazing.
Not unlike the power of menopause, because I know a bunch of hot flashing women that could probably melt some snow themselves. Yeah, but I want to know, what brought you to that monastery? What made you decide you wanted to go and enter this monastery?
What brings us to do most things that that are going to be challenging or difficult is probably that the pain of not doing that is even worse. And I was suffering a lot at that time in my life. There have been some repetitive, destructive patterns. And I wanted to know, how can I understand this in a deeper way? And that's why I went in the monastery. I met a monk, and it was funny. At the time, somebody said, "Oh, there's a monk I think I'd like you to meet." And maybe that's a cautionary tale for people, because you meet this monk, and the next thing you know, they're shaving your hair and you're going in the monastery. But but for me,
note to self.
Note, make that note, right? What I learned, you don't have to go in the monastery, but you do have to be willing, I think, to look within and look at the dark places in ourselves, right? Look at the suffering that we have. Look at how and everybody's suffered in some way. I like to say, if you have a human. If you're in a human body, if you have a human mind, you're going to experience loss, you're going to experience aging, different things. How do we deal with that in a way that is compassionate, kind to ourselves and to others? So there's tremendous lessons to learn. And it's funny, when I met this monk, what drew me to him was this incredible, palpable sense of compassion and kindness that he had about him. That I grew up in Chicago. And I have to tell you, I didn't find people like that monk hanging around on the street corners of Chicago. They just weren't there. But I wanted to know, how did
you would, right?
Yeah, I wish I had. Yeah, but I wanted to know, how did he become like that? And is it possible for any of us to attain a different kind of, profoundly different way of thinking and being? And what it's what I discovered when I got to meet him in the monastery, because he was he was like the abbot, or they call the sayadaw of the monastery. It was a Theravada Buddhist monastery. They were all Burmese monks, actually, and he was a Burmese monk. But he fortunately he spoke English well, but what he loved, that was a lucky thing. What he loved to do was teach the loving kindness meditation. That was, and that is, I think, how he profoundly transformed himself within by doing that practice.
I like that. Loving kindness meditation.
Yeah.
I think everybody should do that, especially these days. My goodness, we need it.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about. Before we get into the meat of the topic, I think we probably should take a break so that we don't interrupt the flow of our conversation. So we'll take a quick break right now. But when we come back, we're going to dive into the book Travelers. And specifically, I want to talk about the spiritual quest that is involved in this book. You mentioned that there's more to the material world than what we can normally feel or experience ourselves. And I really want to talk to you about quantum consciousness, angels, even maybe bilocation, things like that. All of that and a whole lot more when we come back right after this. Welcome back to the Skeptic Metaphysicians. We are talking to Donald Altman, who is a former Buddhist monk and a prolific author of over 20 books that have been translated into different languages across the world. His newest book, Travelers, is a spiritual journey, and it is interesting because this is not your typical spiritual awakening book. This is actually a story that's kind of wrapped into a spiritual exploration. What motivated you to write this book? What's the story behind it?
Well, it's funny. I think the story wrote me, actually, to tell you the truth. And the characters. I mean, I didn't really know where this was going to go. I had this idea for a book about, why are we here? What do we, about the spiritual journey? And I actually tried to write it as a nonfiction book, and it would refuse to be a nonfiction book. And I thought, you know what? I've got to bring this alive in another way. And so I decided to do it as a novel. And it's not, I have to say, though, it's not a, if you want a fluffy, breezy read this summer, this is not that book. But if you want, it's more of an invitation into the unknown, into the dark places in our souls, or the dark places in our lives, into the things that we have to face, whether it's a mental illness or a loss, and how do we get through that as a family? There's some, and I think that is what drives us into the spiritual quest. You talked about, the material world, and, I think even the mental health field, I think, is very steeped in a mechanical view of things. So take a pill, it's these kind of simple ways of looking at things when actually we're very complex. I mean, how can you replace an emotion, right? I mean, I don't know. So I wanted to have an invitation for people to step into the unknown here through this book, and to challenge the reader, actually, and to take them to some places maybe they're, not really comfortable being, which is that non-ordinary reality, that place where, transformation can happen, where miracles can happen, where the unseen becomes known. And I think we're all capable of doing that.
So you said that you're exploring, the dark places we all have. So by dark, is it always grief or something negative, or can it be just something that we don't know about? So it gives us that fear and makes it feel dark.
Yeah, it could be our own fears of something. It could be our own shadow. It could be our blind spot, thing that we are not really willing to look at in ourselves. I mean, it could be something we share with another. It could be dealing with that difficult situation at the office, or with not having things go your way in life. I mean, it's so many different things we have to face. It's not just grief. Loss comes in many different packages and shapes and forms, doesn't it? So, but whatever it is, I think if we can open ourselves up, and a willingness to enter the unknown, right? Enter our own world of even our dreams. Think about how amazing our dreams are. Our dreams take us out of the ordinary reality. And there may be something to our dreams that, a lot of people have solved problems creatively by just dreaming. Some people have written books in their dreams. It's pretty amazing how we can tap into a different world just in that way. But, you guys are doing meditation. That's another wonderful way to connect with the non-ordinary world.
And you are touching on some points that I really wanted to make sure we talked about, because in your book, you do talk about certain key phrases that in the metaphysical and spiritual space, where if you mention these topics, you automatically get someone's attention. Things like quantum consciousness and angels,
Yeah.
bilocation, things like that. Yeah. And in your
I-
story, you say that there's a lot more to this material world than we can normally perceive.
Right.
But you say you have proof of that, right?
Well, here, I'll give you an example. This really happened. I had written the book, and several months after I'd written the book and the publisher had it, I was out hiking in a wilderness area. I live in outside of Portland, and this was an incredible wilderness area. And this area is also mentioned in the book. And in the book, the character is out in this area doing a spiritual quest, and it's at night, and it's a dangerous area. And he has an accident. He falls and he gets injured in some different ways. And in a part of the park that I actually at the time I'd been to the southern part of the park, but never the north part of the park. And I described the part of the park that I didn't really know, but I described it. And here I was in reality several months later out hiking in that part of the park, and I fell and had sustained injuries that were the same ones that my character had sustained in the book.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and then fortunately my wife was there and she helped me out. With the character didn't have that luxury. And as I was going out of this north end of the park, I started looking around. I'm like, oh my God, I described this in the book. What I was in very precise detail in the book, and I had never been there. So,
Okay.
know,
That's astounding.
so it's just an example of me when it happened. I was kind of shocked, and maybe that was helpful to alleviate some of the pain I was in. But it was kind of like here,
Sure.
across time and space, something had happened there that was, what you'd call maybe a synchronicity, something that was unexplainable, right? And yet, two events linked together that seemed non-local, right? But they were connected. And so it was almost like an affirmation of me of what I was trying to say in the book.
And it's almost like, it sounds almost like a chicken and the egg thing. Like, was this a prophetic thing when you were writing it, or did you manifest it when you were writing it?
Hmm.
That's an
Well, he did
interesting
say
question.
The book wrote him.
Well, that's, yeah. Yeah, that's a really good
Oh, that's
question.
true. That's true.
I heard about how the horror writer Stephen King had written about that
King,
killer car. I think it was called Christine. He'd written that novel about
Christine,
and then he almost got killed by a car some years later. But again, I mean,
Wow.
what is the chicken and the egg? I don't know. And I'm not sure
Which
if it,
came first?
yeah, I don't know which came first, but it really shows that, when these anomalies happen in our lives, these things that we often think are coincidences, maybe are not coincidence. I mean, Einstein didn't believe that any of these things happen are coincidences. He felt that all things were somehow connected and determined. He didn't understand the quantum world. He called it a spooky action at a distance or whatever it was, because he could not understand, well, how does this really happen?
Makes you think twice about writing certain things, doesn't it?
just be a historian.
I mean, I've had some other experiences of things that happened moments after I thought of them. One time, it's many years ago, I was in my 20s, and I had a dream and at that period of my life, I was trying some acting, some different things, and I had this dream that this guy was offering me a job to work with this woman who I had met, and it'd be at a trade show, and I'd be dressed up in a lab suit, and she'd be dressed so and so, and we'd be performing at this show, and so I'm having this very vivid dream, and then my phone rings and it woke me up, and I pick up the phone, and it's the guy in the dream who had offered me the job is on the phone offering me the job and describing,
What?
and describing to me exactly. You'll be working with Nancy. That was the woman in the dream, and you're going to be like dressed up in lab technician attire, and I had dreamt it moments before.
Down to the details.
Yeah, down to the detail.
Wow.
I think we're going to call you Spooky Donald Altman from now on.
Well, that hasn't happened very much since then. Maybe I'm kind of happy that it hasn't. I can just enjoy my dreams, not worry about them coming true.
Now, in the book, you really the protagonist, for lack of a better word, of the book is a psychiatrist. You open up the entire book saying, "Hey, full disclosure, this stuff has happened. I can't explain it, but I just wanted to kind of put it out there." You talk a lot about psychiatric wards and things like that. Do you have experience in these types of environments?
Yeah. I mean, I've worked in psychiatric intensive outpatient clinics. In the story, it's a residential unit, and I've been in several residential units and actually had somebody who works in a residential unit read through and make sure it was accurate in all aspects. What is it as to what it's really like in there, what it looks like in there, but I have had, as a psychotherapist, been in those units. So it's I wanted to bring people into that world too, because I think it's a world a lot of people maybe wonder about or haven't really experienced. And
Sure.
And the psychiatrist, he's kind of a cynical character. He's seen it all, and he's had a great loss. I don't want to give anything away in the book, but he's had a great loss in his life. And the interesting thing is he can't heal himself, right? But here he is trying to work and heal others. And through this journey that he takes, he actually is able to transform how he feels about the loss in his life. And the relationship with him and his wife is a very key part of the book as well. It's about, a loss that affects two people. Everybody heals in a different way from a profound loss. So, that's also a part of the book. But he's invited to take this journey, and he meets this strange traveler character and her dog, who's a sentient canine, and they bring themselves into his life in ways he can't imagine.
I am so in. You are speaking my language. I love these kinds of stories. So you're talking about a spiritual awakening type of story that takes place in a psychiatric ward. That is fascinating, which brings up my next question. There's a lot of people that talk about schizophrenia and things like that as maybe it's not a mental illness. Maybe they're just perceiving other worlds that we're not privy to. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there can be, I think there can be a small number of cases maybe where somebody's having a spiritual awakening experience that can maybe mimic what schizophrenia is. And but in those cases, that would not be persistent. So somebody might have an awakening experience of some way, a spiritual initiation at a time of great duress in their life. In fact, I experienced that actually in my 20s when I was experiencing major depressive disorder myself, and had some experiences, out of body experiences that I didn't understand at the time, but that I thought,
So jealous.
yeah, and it was almost like a release valve. It gave me a sense of relief. I wasn't focused on it or obsessed with it. It didn't affect my ability to function, but it said, "Hey, there's more to you than just this physical world," and it made me, and it gave me a sense of hope actually. Whereas schizophrenia is really, something's happening in the brain where hallucinations and delusions become so powerful that people can't get beyond them, and they can become persistent, and they can actually hinder someone's ability to function in this world. So then is when you would want, of course, medication, and there are whole new ways now, of working with schizophrenia. If you get somebody very early, and in the first couple of years, 2 to 5 years when they're first getting these symptoms, and work with them, you can have good success. But often it becomes a persistent problem, and medication can help really tamp down on those hallucinations quite a bit and help people function more. So but I think in a very, very small number of cases, it can maybe appear to mimic schizophrenia. Now, when I was experiencing that, I did not share that with with the person who was treating me for depression at the time, and it's probably a good thing I didn't, because it was temporary, and it didn't leave me feeling bad in any way, right? So I think there's, kind of a difference. I'm not telling people not to share with someone if they're experiencing, symptoms, but you have to, ask, am I able to function in this world? And that's the important thing.
Sure.
And that is really great information, because time after time when we're speaking to different guests and they talk about their spiritual awakening, the kind of one thing they all say is, I felt like I was going crazy. I was hearing these voices, or I was saying things that I wouldn't normally say, but now with you saying more, it's like if it's prohibiting you from living a normal life, that's a difference. That's actually good to know.
Yeah, I mean, if voices are persistent and they're telling you to do things that are not helpful things, there's a problem there, and that needs to be treated. But the spiritual awakenings or different kinds of spiritual experiences can happen, and they can happen when we're awake, but again, the idea is, how are we able to, keep moving forward in our lives? And if they're stopping us, if they're creating fear, if they're creating paranoia, then that's not normal.
Well, in your book, staying on the mental health topic, in your book, you seem to say that there are other ways of healing mental illness other than the traditional ways. Can you recommend some?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that I work with is mindfulness as a tool for helping people. Mindfulness has come into the field of mental health and is helping a lot of people heal from depression and anxiety, and actually reducing those symptoms as much as in some cases medication. Now, I'm not saying it's a substitute. I think everybody's different, and some people need medication. Some people can use a combination of the two, right? Different kinds of coping skills, coping tools. There could be many, many different kinds of those. I think what's important is, when you're asking for help, is that you meet with somebody who you have a rapport with, and that connection with the healer or the therapist is really important. It's been shown that connection is more important even than the modality you're using. There's a moment in the book when the character says something, the psychiatrist says something to his patient, and he blurts out something that he doesn't mean to, and he apologizes in that moment for it, and they end up having a moment together where they laugh, and that is very healing. And it's funny, I've had those moments with clients, those moments where something happens off the wall and you start laughing at it together, and that's a very healing moment. I mean, you can't replicate that. Sometimes therapy comes in really uncertain, unexpected ways.
Unexpected ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also another good key point. Just because you might not have that connection with the therapist, so maybe try another therapist, but don't give up on therapy.
Right.
Because a lot of people
That's a good point.
And it just didn't work, so I'm not going back.
Yeah. Interesting thing about therapy is, I've had people come to me and they'll say, well, Donald, tell me what I should do here. You must know, you're got experience in this. And I'll say, well, no, I can't tell you. If I tell you what to do and it doesn't work out, who are you going to blame? Me. or
sign this disclaimer, please.
Yeah, right. Or if it does work out and you're going to think, well, this really wasn't my idea. So, it's about just trying to help someone find their own wisdom, find their own path, their own journey. And, that I think is wonderful. Where I think we're all here on a journey in a way. And that's really what Traveler's about, is how do we, open up and explore the different pathways that are available to us to see things in new ways, right?
Absolutely. Getting back to your book quickly, because we're running out of time, but I want to make sure that we really focus on it for a second. Who did you write this book for? Who should go out there and get it right now?
Anybody. I think this book is for anybody who wants to explore deeper meaning for themselves. Anybody who wants to overcome grief. Anybody who wants to find, what's stopping them, what's blocking them, and how they can connect with the world, with nature, with the magical parts of themselves that are maybe hidden from view. And, overcome fear. That's also what this book is about. If you're being blocked by your fear of the unknown, your fear to do something, to be brave and take a chance, and I think this book is for you.
Well, I'm a sucker for Way of the Peaceful Warriors, Celestial Prophecy, these types of books that tell a story, a narrative, but that contain great messages inside of it. Your book is right up my alley. You definitely have another sale on your hands now as soon as we finish this conversation, because it sounds like it's a great book. Is there anything else that you think people need to know about you or the book before they move forward with getting it?
Sure. Well, you can find out more about me, and I've written a lot of different books, and some of them are being used in treatment centers. A lot of clinicians use them. You can find out more at mindfulpractices.com. It's MINDFUL practices.com. And that's my website. You can join me on the Psychology Today website. I do the practical mindfulness blog. And also, I have a reflect group, like a meditation group on Facebook. And it's facebook.com/MND mindful without the I, practices. So you can find me there.
Wonderful. We're going to add all of those links directly to our show notes. So if you'd like to access any of those, no need to get a pen. You can go right to skepticmetaphysician.com right now. Go to his episode page. You'll see all those links laid in there directly for you. Makes it super easy and convenient. Donald, this has been absolutely wonderful, fascinating, exciting, all at the same time.
Yes.
I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing of your expertise with us.
Well, thank you so much. I don't know if I was able to prove to you anything, but I tried.
You did. I mean, you gave me a more, what's the right word? Not concise way of thinking about it, but more of a practical way of thinking about things and putting two and two together.
Yeah.
Cool.
And for me, talking about your release of astral projection is what gave you that proof of the non-material world. It gives me such perfect validation, because everyone who listens to the show knows that that's the one, astral projection. That's the thing. That's what I need to know for sure this stuff exists. So I know it works. So I'm going to continue on this path.
Well, thanks again. It was a joy being with both of you.
Oh, no.
Likewise.
It was our
Thank
pleasure
you.
completely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming along on this journey of discovery with us. We'd love to continue our conversation with you on our website at skepticmetaphysician.com or on Facebook and Instagram under Skeptic Metaphysician Podcast. If you know someone who would benefit from hearing the messages we're sharing on the show, do them and us a favor and share the show with them. It will help get the word out about us, and it may just change someone's life for the better. And if you're listening to this on the radio and you missed something, well, not to worry. All of our shows, including this one, can be found at skepticmetaphysician.com, where you can also watch the videos or even send us an email or voicemail directly from the site. We absolutely love feedback and would appreciate hearing from you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have. That's all for now. We'll see you on the next episode of The Skeptic Metaphysicians. Until then, take care.